A new documentary is beginning in Australian cinemas this month, a film called Audrey Napanangka. I'm sure I've got that wrong, but it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of Audrey Napanangka, Penelope McDonald. Penelope, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
You're breaking up. If that's from me,
Oh, it's not working?
it's saying my internet connection's unstable. Can we hang on?
Yeah,
No,
sure.
it's saying it's unstable.
Oh,
I've got
okay.
very good internet, but I came away.
A new documentary is beginning in Australian cinemas this month, a film called Audrey Napanangka. Napanangka. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but that's fine. And to correct me is the director of the documentary, Penelope McDonald. Penelope, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you.
Now, tell me about how you got to know Audrey in the first place.
I've known Audrey we first met in our early 20s, actually, a long time ago. And I was living in a remote community called La Germano in the north of the Tanami Desert. And we became friends, kept in touch over the years. And she began to act in films. And I got her involved with acting in films. And then one day I thought, gee, Audrey would be an interesting subject for a documentary. So that's how I ended up making the documentary.
Okay, how easy was it to get funding and production behind you to be able to make the film?
Well, that, as usual for documentaries, took quite a while. Very fortunate in getting some development funding from Screen Territory and then from Screen Australia. So most of the filming was done during that development period. And then once we had something put together that people were interested in, NITV came on board, and then we got production funding from Screen Australia and Screen Territory.
Very interesting. Now, tell me about the process. I mean, did Audrey give you full permission to film anything you wanted to film?
Audrey's very welcoming to me making this documentary, but of course, if there were things she didn't want filmed, she wouldn't talk about them. So, I mean, we've got a respectful relationship. It was very much a partnership in terms of the making of it. But Audrey is very open and wanting people to know about her life, which is why she allowed us into her life to make this film over such a long time.
Okay, so her life is so interesting, and her extended family is quite incredible. You must have had quite a task of filming all of that, especially the all the different family events and so on that were going on.
Yes, I didn't film all the time, but on and off I started in actually 2012. We began doing some filming, and then when things were happening that I thought might be important to the story, then we'd pull out the camera again. So it was sort of on and off, just keeping, and I'm in touch with Audrey still all the time, so I know pretty well what's happening in her life and what might be interesting to the viewers of it.
Sure. Okay. Now, I mean, one of the issues that comes up, of course, is the whole stolen generations situation, and her story is really so interesting.
Well, it is. And the fact that Audrey and Santo, her partner, they've brought up so many children, and they're children who might otherwise have ended up in foster care, but they don't officially have them as foster parents. They have them because they're part of Audrey's extended family. And she opens her house and her arms to children who are in need of a loving home and a safe home.
Mm. And it's so interesting. She has an Italian husband, and in fact, at one stage, she goes to Sicily to try and sell paintings. Was he quite happy to be filmed and to be part of all this?
Oh, he loves being in front of the camera. He loves telling stories. He's a film in his own right, actually. Santo is a very lovely and interesting man. But the relationship between them is quite remarkable. I mean, his Sicilian family, they really embrace Audrey. I mean, both cultures, the Walbury Aboriginal culture and the Sicilian culture, they're both cultures that love families and extended families. And I think that's been a great thing for both of them.
Yeah, certainly. Another interesting perspective, of course, is Audrey's sister's daughter, Miriam. And her being in and out of jail and her situation, I found so interesting. Again, that there must have been some perhaps boundaries about filming all of that.
We were very fortunate that the prison gave us permission. We went into there several times to film, and we actually gave Miriam a camera, which they allowed us to give her to film herself and her thoughts and so on, which was quite remarkable. And it was actually a good thing because she was able to self-reflect through using the camera. But yes, it was difficult, and deciding, how much and what would go in the film in terms of Miriam's journey.
Yeah, sure, fully understand. And Audrey is such an activist. I found that so interesting.
Yes, she's always been an activist. Actually, there were other things that we filmed so much more for 180 hours of footage. And one thing we filmed was the amazing response here to the death of her close relation, Kumanjay Walker. And Audrey was there at that, and she often will go along to different rallies and so on. And she's never shy of saying, if you don't do such and such, I'm going to ring the ABC. Like, she's not shy on standing up for her rights.
Which is terrific and such an interesting part of the documentary. And also the home movie footage and so on is so interesting as well.
Well, that's always a treasure trove when a filmmaker finds, good home movie footage. Unfortunately, some of it had been taped over because of the successive children in the house, and it was on VHS tapes, and, it might be in the machine and the kids taped over it. So there was more that we didn't have anymore, but we were very fortunate to have what we did, because Santo really loves photographs and filming. And so he filmed in Sicily.
Yes, exactly. That's a part of the film. And as I was saying, the extended family and so on. I mean, there are so many stories involved in all of those family members. So I suppose you had to be selective about which ones that you really wanted to follow through.
That's right. And actually it came down to practicality as well, because some of the children that she's brought up who are adults now, there's Jason Woods, who we didn't follow much at all because he lives out at Uendamu, and he's an animator actually working at PAW Media. And Juliet, they're the two first ones, was Juliet and Jason, and they don't live in Alice Springs, so they weren't often around to film. I would have liked to film with them more, but, we couldn't fit everything in one story anyway.
Yeah, of course. I could see this as being a series, but
Exactly. I was thinking of Bridgerton or something similar, but the Walbury version of that.
how interesting. And I must also note the music that you used. David Bridie is such a good composer.
Oh yes, it was a very fortunate thing for David Bridie to come on. He just was so he loved the documentary, and he was very terrific in the music he composed. He understood what we wanted, what we needed to make the story really work. And he
Sure.
works with a whole bunch of other musicians who are really, really, really good at what they do.
Certainly are. So when you completed the documentary, how did Audrey and others, the husband, whoever, respond?
Oh, the family was so excited. Actually, all through the process, Santa used to come into our production office in Alice Springs, and he'd say, "Oh, this is going to be, this is going to be so good." And I'd say, "How do you know that, Santa?" But he was so confident. And once it was finished, the family's so proud of it. And we had a lovely family, and some of the crew late last year. It was so wonderful just to see the joy, the laughter, the tears from the family members, who were watching it.
That is terrific. So tell me, how is the film being rolled out? I know it's being released in cinemas this month, but what's the distribution process?
We're working with Demand Films, which is cinema on demand, but we've got 18 or 20 cinemas that are locked in. Those screenings will go ahead. We're starting in Alice Springs on the 23rd of May. And then Audrey and I are fortunate. We're going to travel on a whistle-stop tour with the film. We're going to Adelaide, then we're going to Melbourne, then we're going across to Launceston, Hobart, then up to Sydney, Wollongong, Canberra, then Orange, then Brisbane, and then to Coffs Harbour and Sawtell. So that will be it's wonderful for audiences to be able to meet Audrey. You know, I don't think we'll get tour as extensively with in the future, but that's one way to see it now. Or people can sort of, if they want it to come to their cinema, if they get a group of people, it can come there. And later on, it will go on NITV. They were one of our funders, one of our partners, but that will be later in the year.
Okay. Is there a website people can go to discover where the film is playing?
Yes, it's audreynapanangka.film.
Okay. Oh, well, there you go. .film. That's interesting.
Yes. Apparently, it's a new way. I'll tell you something interesting that's quite new to me. The trailer has gone on TikTok and it's gone gangbusters. It's had 225,000 views or something like that on TikTok. So that's very different for me. Haven't been a TikTok user to date, but I might start using TikTok.
Wow, brave new social media world. That's how interesting. That is terrific. And I gather the film will have currency overseas as well.
Oh, absolutely. People in New Zealand have gone on to TikTok and said, when is it coming here? But I think certainly lots of different countries will relate to the stories because it's a story about family. And I think the challenges that this family faces are not dissimilar to challenges in many parts of the world.
Mm. And it's so important to focus on First Nations people and issues, especially in the current climate with this referendum coming up.
Absolutely. And I think from this story coming from the heart of Australia, from Alice Springs, Mantua, you know, there's been a lot of negative press around this area lately. So it's a really good time because it's not a negative story as you've seen it. It's shows life as it is. And we're doing an impact campaign, partnering with organisations that are doing amazing work.
Yes, absolutely right. Just going back to you mentioned, I think before 180 hours of filming or whatever. Tell me about the editing process, because that's always the most difficult task.
Well, you know, we were struck by COVID, in fact. That made it difficult because there aren't editors where I live in Alice Springs for something of this size. So I was working with an editor from Sydney. However, we couldn't get together because we were locked down here in the Northern Territory because of COVID. So for the first months, she was working in the dark, so to speak. For this sort of documentary, I know a lot of people do edit in different places to the editor nowadays. You can, but for an observational documentary like this, I think that was very challenging. And then I actually had 3 different editors because it took a long time to edit. So they each added they were terrific editors, Karen DeChenque, Jane St. Vincent Welsh, and then James Bradley, and they each added something of great value to the way the stories ended up.
Yes.
And
No,
at the end, the last part of the editing, I was in Sydney working with the editor.
okay. Yes. No, it's turned out really well. So it's well done on everyone involved. that is excellent. So Penelope, I'm quite intrigued. Tell me about your background as a filmmaker. How did it all come about?
Well, I actually made my first film with the Walbury community of Largermano, where Audrey was living. And so she used to always introduce me to her Walbury friends as, you know, the name she gives me, my number Jimba. And she would say, well, she's the one who remember that film, because, you know, it's a film that was made in 1985 on, you know, it was the first film I made. I went to film school after making that film, actually. And somebody in Largermano, a young filmmaker, he describes me as the Neil Armstrong of film for Largermano, because, you know, he remembers me when he was a little boy working there making films with people. So my journey began actually with the people that Audrey's closely related to. You know, I've dabbled in filmmaking before I was living there, but that's when I made a funded film, and it's the rest is history. I kept making films for a number of years as a director, but I also worked as a producer because I was coming out of film school at a time when a lot of First Nations filmmakers were telling their stories and they needed a producer. I worked first producing something with Tracy Moffat, Night Cries, which was in competition in Cannes, and then I worked with Lynn and a number of others. And so I was more in a creative producer role. I've worked a lot with very emerging filmmakers. I've taught film at various institutions, UTS and, the film school and so on. And then I went into a bureaucratic job for a while. I came back to the Northern Territory to head up the government screen agency, which I did for about a decade. And then I really wanted to get back into making films. And, this is the first one I've made, and there are a couple more in the pipeline.
Oh, what an excellent history, and so on. And when you say you've got some films in the pipeline, can I ask you what they are?
Well, it's early days to really tell you too much about them, but one I'm doing is in partnership with an Aboriginal man, and it's the story of his great grandfather.
Okay, look forward to that with interest. But but in the meantime, we have Audrey Napanangka, getting close to getting the pronunciation right, which is in various cinemas around Australia this month and next. And we've been speaking to the director, Penelope McDonald. Penelope, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Pleasure. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.